It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Marrakesh in Morocco. As the number of people killed in Friday's earthquake climbs above 2,000, there is now a desperate search in the rubble for survivors. The UK sends 60 rescue specialists to join an international effort as the scale of the devastation is laid bare.
What's interesting about this earthquake, it's not that everything just collapsed in. The power of the earthquake was such that these houses basically exploded upwards and then collapsed.
Also ahead on Sky News at 10, the president of Spain's Football Federation, Luis Rubiales, resigns after weeks of controversy over that kiss at the Women's World Cup. The terror suspect, Daniel Khalif, is charged with escaping custody as Wandsworth prison experiences another serious incident. Rishi Sunak warns China not to interfere in UK democracy after 2 men are arrested over spying allegations in Parliament. And a fond farewell to Farah as the Olympic legend runs his final race. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Good evening from Marrakesh in Morocco, a city where tens of thousands are now sleeping rough, and in a country where there is a desperate search for survivors following Friday's huge earthquake. Tonight, 60 British rescue specialists are joining an international effort in towns and villages that have been reduced to ruins. More than 2,100 people are now known to have died in the disaster, as the government here does face mounting criticism about the speed of its response. The earthquake, which had a magnitude of 6.8, struck late on Friday night in the Atlas Mountains, about 50 miles from where I am in Marrakesh. Now, I spent the day in the mountain town of Amismis. In a moment, we'll take my report from there. But first, our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, reports from Talat near Koub, close to the earthquake's epicenter.
This is a desperate race to save lives, but as each hour passes, the hopes of the nation are beginning to dim. The earthquake struck high in the Atlas Mountains, making already treacherous roads impassable. The single route opened is jammed with traffic, police, emergency teams, military and ambulances. They pass groups of survivors who have either lost their homes or are too scared to stay inside them. Everyone here is outside now. The only quick way to get here is by helicopter. They're shuttling the injured and the dead away from the epicenter. Survivors engulfed in clouds of dust as they land and take off. The sheer force of this earthquake is astonishing. Whole streets have been utterly destroyed in what survivors say was more like an enormous explosion than the shaking of an earthquake. In blistering heat, they're digging through the rubble, looking for survivors, but expecting to find the dead. While we filmed, we saw many dead, but we saw no survivors. As the body is taken from the rubble and wrapped in a blanket, recovery teams are followed by the family. Many are simply inconsolable. Time and again, here at the epicenter. The families of the missing gather on a newly formed ridge created when the street disintegrated. Is there any hope left now, or do you think everyone here has died?
Sometimes you find someone alive, sometimes not. They have already died. But there is hope. I rescued 3 people here and 10 in the other village above.
Fatima has lost 10 members of her family. There are others still missing. She has given up hope of anyone still being alive. I mean, this is almost like an explosion rather than an earthquake, because it came up.
Within seconds, everything fell down. Some people managed to run out of their houses, others didn't make it.
The rescue teams use drills to break through the exposed floors and ceilings, but most of the work is done by hand. They pray for survivors, but they treat the dead with great dignity.
Well, it's painstaking work and it's dangerous too. The rescuers are actually looking to recover bodies from this particular house, an apartment block. They've taken at least 2 or 3 bodies out today, and family members have been here. But it's dangerous because they're actually trying to get underneath. Obviously, it's very unstable. Another aftershock and it could collapse on them. They say this is going to take them days. What's interesting about this earthquake, it's not that everything just collapsed in. The power of the earthquake was such that these houses basically exploded upwards and then collapsed. It was such was the force of the earthquake because we're right at the epicenter.
Youssef was here when the body of his mother was removed from the family home. He has returned with his uncle and cousins to wait for the relief teams to find the body of his father. They know there is no hope left now. Some gather under any shade they can find to mourn the loss of family members. Impromptu wakes for those who have already been buried, while others sit next to their newly recovered loved ones. All hope gone now, just waiting for permission to take them away. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Talat Nerkoub, Morocco.
Well, the number of fatalities from this earthquake is officially just over 2,000. But today, a paramedic told us that there could be 2,000 people dead in just one small town in the foothills of the Atlas Mountains. It's called Amismes, and I spent the day there today. And what we discovered was a town and a people in a state of absolute shock. This is grim, exhausting work, clearing out a building in search of the dead. Rubble extracted by hand using rusty buckets. Here, there is no hope of finding survivors. The screams of those inside have gone silent. This man pulled out 3 bodies after the earthquake. He says he feels lucky to be alive. And he's right. This region is full of the dead and those who mourn them. Hafida's brother, Milu, died in this rubble. He was trying to shelter his son. In the end, they both perished, along with Milu's wife. Only their young daughter survived. Hafida told me, "I will now adopt her. I will be the mother to my niece because her whole family has died." We drive further into the mountains and the damage just gets worse. Parts of this old town have been simply flattened. Houses where floors have collapsed upon each other. We meet Fatima, bewildered but alive.
I don't know, and it was dark, and the door, my room wasn't what I want to open. I didn't know how I get down or how I opened it. I can't remember nothing because I was in shock. There is no lights. There is and this is my house. I lost everything. We are living now on the streets.
Help is slowly reaching these places, but the authorities are overwhelmed. A paramedic told us he fears 2,000 people are dead in this small town alone. The devastation wreaked by this earthquake is extraordinary. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. And the grim reality is that across this region, there are a lot more bodies still to be found. Helen Gallagher moved here with her family 8 years ago. They run a mountain guiding business. She said it was a miracle they survived and admits that, like others here, she hasn't yet come to terms with the scale of this disaster.
And we just couldn't ever imagine something like this happening here, really. It's just been totally devastating. We're just in survival mode and just trying to get help out to the people who most need it, and we'll process it afterwards. Yeah.
These are dangerous places. Houses still collapsing, many roads impassable, and help is desperately needed. Every glimmer of hope is cherished. In the mountain village of Moulay Ibrahim, a survivor was pulled from the rubble alive but optimism is rare. The pain and after effects of this earthquake will last for years. Well, on the face of it, there is a gulf of difference between a big city like Marrakesh and these small towns up near the mountains, but they share something in common. And if you look around me, all here are thousands upon thousands of people who are sleeping rough tonight here in Marrakesh because their homes have been destroyed or damaged, they're not used, or in many cases because they are fearful of another aftershock or fearful that a house could fall. And they have good reason for that. We have seen buildings that have fallen hours, maybe even a day after they were originally damaged. What the people here in Marrakesh do have, though, are all the facilities of a modern city. There is water here, there is access to food, there are emergency services. You go up into the mountains and they don't have that. There's no running water, there's no electricity, the communications are very patchy, and the security situation, well, you might imagine the chaos that is engulfing these places at the moment. So when we were there, what we saw were things akin to refugee camps and a growing desperation, people saying that they want the world to know that they need help. Well, there is an international response coming. It's coming from the UK, from France and Spain, and from the United Kingdom, where 60 rescue specialists have now set off from RAF Bryce Norton and are on their way here to Morocco to lend their expertise. But I have to say, having been to some of these places, you do question just what the likelihood is of finding survivors, because these buildings, as we saw, were often made of pretty flimsy materials. And we've seen repeatedly this effect of simple pancaking, of floor falling onto the floor below, falling onto the floor below, and that is devastation for anybody who is either in those buildings or near them. Now, Morocco hasn't had an earthquake like this for 60 years, and so there is criticism of the government that it was too slow to react, that it didn't send aid up into mountains, that it didn't ask for this international assistance quicker. I think much of the response from the government will be that, yes, we have done our best, we have deployed the army, but that nobody expected this to happen. Most of this country was not alive the last time an earthquake like this hit. The tragedy is, of course, now Morocco is having to come to terms with something that nobody here is ever going to forget.
Adam, thank you. The president of the Spanish Football Federation, Luis Rubiales, has resigned following weeks of controversy surrounding his behaviour at the Women's World Cup. He's come under intense pressure after kissing the Spanish footballer Jenny Hermoso following Spain's victory in the tournament. In an interview with Piers Morgan, Rubiales said he can no longer do his work and will now stand down.
About my resignation, yes, I'm going to do. You're going to resign? Yeah, I'm going to. Yes, because I cannot continue my work.
What was the final moment for you? Was it talking to your family, your dad, perhaps?
Yeah, my father, my daughters. I spoke with them. It's not. They know it's not a question about me and some friends very very close to me. And they say to me, Luis, now you have to focus in your dignity and to continue your life.
Well, our sports correspondent Rob Harris is here with me, and after weeks of being adamant in saying that he wasn't going to resign, does it come as a shock that now he's made that decision?
Yes, having held on for so long, defiantly held on, despite the outcry with protests across Spain, the players refusing to play on. He had been expected to go a couple of weeks ago, but he stood up at an assembly of the Spanish Federation and hit out at the players, the accusers, and there he was still trying to hold on. But then he was suspended by FIFA, which really made this moment inevitable, that his resignation was going to come, because he was being investigated not only internationally by FIFA, which forced him temporarily out of his Spanish FA position and indeed his position as UEFA vice president. Also, there's a criminal case now pending in Spain with prosecutors pursuing the case, and the Spanish government also looking to declare himself unsuitable to hold such an office. But really, this has been a growing outcry since the moment he kissed Jenny Hermoso on the podium in Sydney, just 3 weeks ago, when they beat England in the World Cup final. And there was an apology from the Spanish Federation, the new temporary leadership, and a sense all round that this has overshadowed what has been a great achievement for Spanish football. But at the same time, it has sparked a widespread reckoning for women in Spain, in football, and more broadly about the treatment and misogyny that they do face. But tonight, some attempt for Spanish football and world football to move on, with Luis Rubiales announcing his resignation.
OK, Rob, he has put out a note on social media, on X, saying that he defends his innocence still, so no real apology. No,
and he was still insisting in his most recent statement before this that it was consensual with Jenny Hermoso on that podium, that enforced kiss. And it has really been a sign of his defiance, not quite seeing what the problem is. And you've also sensed that across football, in some European football circles, slightly bemused by us pursuing this as a story, and also why this is such a big moment. But this really shows that perhaps the players aren't getting the closure that they want. And we've already seen as well the Spanish women's national team coach, Jorge Vilda, being dismissed in the last week as well. He was someone who was a close ally of Rubiales. So this has had far-reaching repercussions from that moment 3 weeks ago of that great triumph for the Spanish footballers who've seen their moment tarnished by Luis Rubiales, and still he's fighting on. We'll wait to see now what happens to all those cases against him at the Spanish and international levels.
Indeed. Rob, thank you. The terror suspect, Daniel Khalif, has been charged with escaping from Wandsworth prison. The former soldier was arrested after 3 days on the run on a canal towpath in West London. The Justice Secretary has told Sky News that 40 prisoners have been transferred from Wandsworth in light of the jailbreak. And tonight, news of a disturbance at the jail, as our national correspondent Tom Parmenter reports.
5 days after an inmate escaped, another major incident at Wandsworth. A prisoner had just been attacked with a knife. Medics and police went through the gates to help prison staff dealing with the emergency. Later, the MOJ said staff swiftly responded to an incident between prisoners at HMP Wandsworth today. We have a zero-tolerance approach to violence and will always take strong action against those who break the rules. It comes as 2 investigations are getting underway into the prisoner escape here on Wednesday. Daniel Khalif has now been charged over the breakout and is back in custody. But this prison, built in 1851 in southwest London, faces difficult questions over how he escaped and what needs to change.
I think it is also important to stress that these are very, very rare incidents, but we take them extremely seriously, which is why I set up the inquiries that you referred to look into the circumstances of the apparent escape, but also issues about categorisation. And I asked for there to be preliminary findings on my desk by the end of the week.
Cliff Harper did time inside Wandsworth after a road rage incident in 2017. For him, there's only one solution.
Either pull the prison down and rebuild it, if that's what they want to do, because they've also closed other prisons. I mean, I believe from speaking to other inmates that have been to Scrubs and other places, they're just as bad.
There is, though, investment in building new jails and refurbishing existing ones. But the Chief Inspector of Prisons says it isn't enough.
It's in many prisons that we're inspecting around the country where we're seeing prisoners sharing cells that were originally designed for one person in very cramped conditions. We're also seeing that putting an extra strain on staff, which means that prisoners aren't being unlocked to do some of the essential things they need to do if they're going to progress and stop offending when they come out.
And now Wandsworth has yet another investigation. The victim of the stabbing was taken to a major trauma centre in a critical condition. Prisoners do attack other inmates fairly regularly, but for this to happen so soon after such an embarrassing escape for the prison service means that it's difficult to convince everyone outside of these gates that this place is under control. And it creates yet another level of scrutiny for the management team here. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, South West London.
Rishi Sunak has raised what he says are very strong concerns over Chinese interference in UK democracy with the country's premier. The discussions at the G20 summit follow the arrest of 2 men linked to reports of spying in Westminster. The researcher at the centre of the investigation is said to have had connections to several senior Tory MPs. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
Face-to-face at the G20, Rishi Sunak is said to have vented serious concerns to the Chinese premier, bringing up allegations of a spy in Westminster at the start of their 20-minute meeting.
I ranged a range of different concerns that we have in areas of disagreement, and in particular my very strong concerns about any interference in our parliamentary democracy, which is obviously unacceptable.
And how did that go down?
Well, as I said, we discussed a range of things, and I raised areas where there are disagreements, and this is just part of our strategy to protect ourselves, protect our values and our interests.
It's here that one of the 2 men arrested under the Official Secrets Act is understood to have worked as a researcher, holding a parliamentary pass allowing him to forge connections with MPs. He had links to Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Alicia Cairns and the now Security Minister Tom Tugendhat, although these are said to have ended prior to him entering office. Former military intelligence officer Philip Ingram believes Chinese authorities attempted to recruit him 6 years ago and says this latest development isn't a surprise.
If you're an influencer, you're a target, and everyone that's in Parliament is an influencer. They'll have sensitive information because they will have opinions on who supports government policy, who doesn't support government policy, and what makes other people on those committees and groups think, what makes them tick.
It was only last year that MI5 said UK-based lawyer Christine Lee had tried to interfere in UK politics for Beijing.
While the government certainly sees China as a challenge, it also wants a constructive relationship, not least because of big global issues like climate change and pandemic prevention. But the news of a possible spy here will raise questions over that approach from some in Westminster who say UK policy on Beijing has been too soft for too long. Relations have cooled since David Cameron rolled out the red carpet for Xi Jinping in 2015. But it was just 2 weeks ago that Foreign Secretary James Cleverly visited China, the first trip by such a senior UK figure in 5 years.
Rishi Sunak, when he was running for Prime Minister, said that he thought China was a systemic threat, and I agreed with him, which means your policy is set around that. Since then, the policy has been completely watered down. The reality is that then weakens the responses of the security services.
Flying back to the UK this evening, Rishi Sunak now finds himself under fire for foreign policy and facing suggestions of overseas interference close to home. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
The Home Secretary is calling for a ban on the American XL bully dog. Suella Braverman described the breed as a clear and lethal danger, particularly to children, after an attack on an 11-year-old girl in Birmingham. West Midlands police are investigating the attack after the girl and 2 men were injured yesterday. The Met Office says it's likely that the UK has experienced its 7th consecutive day above 30 degrees, setting a new record for September. But flash floods and strong winds could be ahead, with a yellow thunderstorm warning in place across large parts of the UK until midnight tonight. A senior union leader has warned the Labour Party not to become a 1990s tribute act after a member of Sir Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet told Sky News he's immensely proud of Labour's achievements under Tony Blair. The Unite General Secretary, Sharon Graham, said Labour had to consign 1997 to the history books.
The economy is in crisis, Britain is in crisis, and what we need to do now is not to look back to 1997, what we need to do is be more like what happened in 1945. The country needs a reboot and Labour needs to put policies forward that give it that reboot.
The most successful British track athlete in Olympic history, Farah, has hung up his professional running shoes at the Great North Run. Said it was time for him to take a break so he could enjoy himself and watch his football team, Arsenal. Our North of England correspondent, Shingi Mararike, was in South Shields to watch his final race.
Britain's most successful ever track and field Olympian lining up one final time. Even if those legendary strides weren't enough to cross the line first today, you got the sense it didn't matter. There are so many memories to savour for him and them.
What was going through your mind when you had the chance to talk to those people on the sidelines and engage with them? What was going through your mind?
Honestly, without the support I've had in my career, the people who's been engaged for so many years, see me win, lose, it was hard, and I just wanted to connect with them.
In an illustrious career, he won Olympic gold 4 times, including 2 in London in front of a home crowd. Moments remembered by millions, including one familiar face he lined up with today.
I remember being in the stadium in London in 2012 when he won on that final Saturday night. You know, yeah, sporting history. And to go out in style like he did today, absolutely brilliant.
But beyond the smiles and the success, a secret. He had been trafficked to the UK as a child and given a false name. Today he was reflecting on not just his career, but his journey.
You will have hurdles in your life, but it's how you overcome the hurdles, how you have to keep on grafting, keep working hard. As a young boy, you know, I came to the UK not speaking a word of English, child trafficked into the UK, given a different identity. I struggled. I never give up on myself.
It's that attitude that has won him so much admiration.
I've seen him before loads of times at the Great North Run. It's nice to see him for the last one.
This one was extra special, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Him doing like the double, the 5,000, 10,000 Olympics, world champs. Has too many to name, to be honest with you, because he's done that much. But yeah, legend.
With his last race now over, it looks like Sir Mo might already be mentoring the next generation. And as for his future,
retired man!
He wants to have a rest before anything else. Shingi Marike, Sky News, South Shields.
The time now to get the rest of the sports news with David.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
She's known by Luton fans as the Old Girl, and the Old Girl has had a bit of a makeover. A new look Kenilworth Road, up to scratch and ready for the Premier League. The chief executive has been right across every aspect of the £10 million rebuild and invited our cameras along to record every step, starting back in mid-May and that very special final night at the Old Girl.
This throwback of a stadium, the stadium that is going to have some real logistical issues to address if they are promoted. Oh, that's useful, and in! Lockyer! Kenilworth Road erupts! Luton Town are Wembley bound! Luton enjoy the taste of EFL playoff victory!
Wembley went well, of course, and within moments of celebration starting, work on preparing Kenilworth Road for the Premier League began.
The time we won at Wembley, we did literally have trucks parked up outside ready to go, so there's no minute left really spare. We had to get going straight away. It's a military operation. We've you know, literally every single hour of the day has been spent in every corner of the ground doing something.
A military operation indeed. It had to be best foot forward to get it all done in time. Only around 90 days to do so much, including a new stand with TV gantry, upgraded floodlights, new toilets, technical area, improvements to the away dressing room, safe standing, new main entrance, extra parking, media suite, TV studio, extra and better disabled facilities. Not to mention relaying the pitch after all the construction was done, and underneath it all, £1 million worth of cabling. That's where electrician David Wood comes in. He's a big Luton fan.
Absolutely amazing to be in the Premier League. I say I was down here for 20 years, so I was here in the conference when we had, you know, 12, 14 away fans coming down on a dark Tuesday night. But to be in the Premier League, just amazing. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Down the road in Luton, there's a brand new stadium on the way. But until then, Kenilworth Road remains home. The big change for the big league is the new Bobbers stand. Gone are those corporate and executive boxes hastily erected in the 1980s. Replaced by a state-of-the-art TV gantry needed to help cater for 50 matchday cameras. And below the gantry, room for around 1,000 new seats. The extra capacity means Kenilworth Road won't be the smallest stadium in the Premier League. Bournemouth will. Gary Sweet has one eye on this season and one eye on the future.
It's really, really important that we bring this alive and make it feel like it's integrated as a part of the football stadium. Now, we could have done this an awful lot cheaper and actually in some ways quicker. But I think what we're doing here is actually adding to Kenilworth Road. We're improving it, we're making it feel like it's a part of the old girl that exists. This stand here is going to be taller, it's going to be more imposing on this side. There'll be supporters on this side making a noise as well that you won't be able to avoid, that opposition players won't be able to avoid. The structural engineers that we've used are used.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview, including this story on the front of the Financial Times. Their headline, Sunak accuses China of interfering in Britain's parliamentary democracy. Tonight, we're joined by HuffPost UK's political editor, Kevin Schofield, and The Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews. Do stay with us for more.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent, and I'm based here in Beijing. My most memorable story was covering the extreme zero COVID restrictions.
A massive COVID wave is sweeping this city, but officially, almost no one has died.
This is a 4-lane dual carriageway, completely shut off. Some things are being allowed in, but actually the only thing we've seen coming out is an ambulance. The message from China is clear. This is a modernised military, absolutely able to fight an international war if needed. Is this military ready?
We are prepared to face every kind of challenge.
My biggest challenge is adequately telling the stories of the Chinese people, even when the authorities would prefer me not to.
Hey.
By the rules, we are allowed to film in the streets.
To the left.
I will always remember the atmosphere at the Shanghai protests. It was an electric mix of excitement, fear, and defiance, and a sense that history was being made. It's hard to express just how incredibly unusual these scenes are in China.
There are people who are afraid.
On the streets of Xinjiang, there is still a tension. Heavy police, a sense they're always watching.
It's really an incredible eeriness to this place, and it just is completely abandoned. The Chinese housing market, for so long a driver of growth, is now a real liability. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's actually hard to describe the cold here. It's so intense, it literally takes your breath away.
I can't tell if I'm moving it or it's moving me, but it's a very strange feeling.
The world is watching what's happening here.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. More than 2,100 people are now known to have died in Morocco's devastating earthquake as rescuers hunt for survivors. The president of the Spanish Football Federation, Luis Rubiales, has resigned following weeks of controversy after he kissed a player on the mouth at the Women's World Cup. Daniel Khalif has been charged with escaping from Wandsworth prison and will appear in court tomorrow. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with HuffPost UK's political editor, Kevin Schofield, and The Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro leads with Rishi Sunak's warning to his Chinese counterpart that interference with the UK's democracy will not be tolerated. It follows reports that a person working in Parliament has been arrested for allegedly spying for Beijing. That story is also on the front of the Financial Times. It says Rishi Sunak confronted the Chinese Premier at the G20 summit about the accusations. The spy saga leads the Daily Mail as calls grow for the government to ban Beijing from attending the UK's World First Summit on Artificial Intelligence this autumn in response. The Guardian's top story tomorrow is the epidemic of preventable cancer cases sweeping the UK. It's estimated 184,000 cancers caused by smoking, drinking, obesity and sunburn will be diagnosed this year. The Mirror is leading with their Dangerous Dogs campaign. The Home Secretary has said the American XL bully is a clear and lethal danger after 3 people were injured in an attack by the breed. Meanwhile, The Eye is reporting UK interest rate hikes are set to end, according to experts. And The Star says millions of staff are planning on ditching work tomorrow to enjoy what could be the last day of Britain's heatwave. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front page of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Kevin Schofield and Kate Andrews, who are not planning to ditch work tomorrow because of the weather. Or are you?
Definitely not. Definitely not. In case my boss is watching.
No one's watching. Let's start with the UK-China relations and that story. Front page of the FT, Sunak's warning to the Chinese not to interfere in UK parliamentary democracy. Take us into this story, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not the headline from the G20 summit that Rishi Sunak in Downing Street had hoped for when he flew out. But yeah, we're told that the Prime Minister confronted the Chinese Premier, who is at the G20 in New Delhi, about these reports, these allegations of Chinese spying activity in Parliament. We're told that he laid down the law, said it's unacceptable behaviour. The problem, I think, that Rishi Sunak has got, however, is that he himself has downgraded the threat level posed by China. Now, Liz Truss and Boris Johnson both said it was a threat. It was an important word, strong word to the UK. He downgraded that to a challenge. Now, that has angered quite a lot of Conservative MPs, most notably Ian Duncan-Smith, former leader. And they have today, understandably, almost been saying, well, we did warn you that as much as you see China as clearly an important economic partner, potentially, it's also a security threat. And as we see, if these allegations are true, then that obviously is a threat. And yeah, as I say, it's put Rishi Sunak, I think, in a bit of an uncomfortable position.
But Kate, according to Rishi Sunak, he's been quite forthright in making his concerns known.
It's not so difficult to be forthright. It's difficult to take action on the issue. And one of the difficulties for this government it won't just be a difference in opinion between former leaders and who's in charge now. You have very recent reports. January last year, British MPs were warned by MI5 about a Chinese agent who had been trying to engage in these kinds of activities. Just this summer, you had a report that was delivered to the House of Commons, according to the FT, about China's increasingly sophisticated espionage and that the UK systems were just woefully inadequate for dealing with this. So it has been flagged on numerous occasions, almost regardless of opinion about how dangerous one country might be, to know that your systems and your security is just not up to scratch. And then to have a story like this come out, have these kinds of allegations come out, that somebody who was working in Parliament was, known by the security minister, was known by the Foreign Affairs Committee chair. People have come out and said, well, we didn't know them that well. We didn't know them in our current positions. But the fact that they got to interact with them is hugely embarrassing for the UK. And it's difficult to be able to say that they weren't warned that their own security systems, their own vetting processes weren't up to scratch.
The Metro, Kevin, pointing to the fact their headline, PM's China spy showdown. I mean, just how big a story is this at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big story. Clearly, as Kate says, this is something that the government has been warned about China's activities. Now, Rishi Sunak has decided that, on balance, it's better to engage with China because of the size of its economy. Clearly, it is economically important that we are able to trade with China. It produces a lot of goods, it buys a lot of goods. But as I say, it's a difficult balancing act when it comes to the security threat that China poses. And it's pretty embarrassing because this is, again, if these allegations are true, it is proof that that those warnings were correct, and it calls the Prime Minister's judgment into question, I think.
I think one of the interesting things about the headlines we're seeing today is that this is the story to come out of the G20, and it's not the story that the government wanted. They would like to be talking about a potential trade deal with India. They would like to be talking about all kinds of, better opportunities for the UK amongst those G20 countries, amongst those advanced economies. And, we've seen Rishi Sunak and others putting out photos of him talking to Joe Biden and him talking to Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron. I mean, you've seen all of these really great opportunities for there to be a story, but that story hasn't actually emerged. And the one that has is actually a domestic story and a rather embarrassing one. And I think that is also a difficulty for the government going into the week.
And just looking in a bit more detail, the Metro's coverage, saying that some senior Conservatives have criticised Mr Sunak for seeking a relationship with China, which they see increasingly as a threat. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly was recently criticised for holding talks with Chinese officials in Beijing. And we do remember that the first time in many years that a senior government cabinet member has attended and met with the Chinese. It is going to be very difficult for the Prime Minister to row back from this opening of arms to China that we've seen. Yeah, but I mean, he talked tough on China during the Conservative leadership campaign last year when he went up against Liz Truss. When he eventually became Prime Minister, he then began to roll back on it, which was a marked shift because Liz Truss was very tough on China. Obviously, she's former Foreign Secretary, so I think that informed her thinking on China a lot as well. So, yeah, as I say, it is quite embarrassing. And as Kate said, this isn't the stuff that Downing Street wanted to be talking about, because we've already seen him, and we might talk about this in a little bit, he's had to react to the prisoner escaping as well. So it's almost like he's been blown around by events, number 10, and having to react to things that are happening to the government rather than actually dictating and getting on the front foot, which is where the government is desperate to be. Well, let's move on to that story. You mentioned the prison break. Daniel Khalif, who's now been captured, now back in captivity. We're just looking at the Metro. Ongoing problem for the government. We spoke to the Justice Secretary earlier on Sky News, and another incident with 40 inmates that have had to be moved out of Wandsworth as a result, a follow-on from the Daniel Khalif escape.
It just doesn't feel like the institutions are working properly, whether it be security in Parliament, whether it be the security of a prison. It's clear that it's not going so well, and as Kevin says, it's catching up to the Prime Minister even when he's out of the country on the international stage. Daniel Cleave has now been found. It took 75 hours. There's some note in the Metro about how that is considered amongst the police to actually be quite quick. As it says, you're not dealing with a television show, you're dealing with real life here. He was found. He will be charged with this properly tomorrow. But it just feels as if the resources and the way that they're coming together is not always in our best interest. And we can talk about safety all we want, but when you have alleged security breaches, when you have people escaping prison, it's very difficult for the government to really focus on anything else. I mean, those are going to be top concerns from the public. So it's no wonder that that's catching up to the Prime Minister when he's in India. But it is clear that Wandsworth Prison is still in a very difficult state. It's an aging jail. The resources aren't there. They're having to move prisoners out. It doesn't really scream confidence, does it, Kevin?
No, it doesn't. And it's interesting, actually, inside the story, there's a separate story about an inmate being stabbed at Wandsworth Prison after Daniel Cleave escaped. He's critically ill now in hospital, and I think it plays into this idea, and it's obviously unfortunate that it's caused, or that we aren't focusing on this usually, and this has all come as a result of Daniel Cleave escaping. But Alex Chalk talks about the 40 that they've moved out to other prisons. You don't explain why these 40 have been moving, why those specific 40, and if Daniel Cleave hadn't escaped, presumably those 40 would still be in there, and, you know, obviously it's now been deemed necessary to move them. So again, it's shown that the government doesn't, it's reacting to events rather than
we do need an answer to. Kevin and Kate for the minute, thank you. We are going to take a break coming up. An interesting story about interest rates. We'll tell you more in a moment.
I'm doing well. It's taken long to recover, but we're getting better every day. And lots of positivity has come from the accident through the Zambezi School project. And yeah, just focusing on that at the moment.
So let's unpack that. Tell me what you want to tell me about what happened.
So nearly 2 years ago, I was whitewater rafting on the Zambezi. I was attacked by a crocodile. Both of my legs were bitten. I was injured quite severely. But I had friends around me who saved my life and have been having medical treatment since then, recovering as much as we can. And it's very difficult physically, but for me, it was the mental side of things that was much more difficult to get through. And I found that positivity is the only thing that can get you through something like that. I was just working with different charities and organisations out there, looking for different things to do to spend some time out there. And this happened right at the start, so I kind of brought that through for the rest of my gap year. It was also kind of to pull me through it mentally. I needed something to focus on in hospital, because otherwise you go to a really dark place and it's difficult to get out of without something like that. We built a school for 104 pre and primary school students who've never learned to read or write before. And the
construction.
Yeah,
here we go.
The cycle of poverty there is relentless. People are stuck in it, and education is the only way out of it. So it's vital that these children receive the education they deserve. Tragically, in May, one of our students, Kelvin, was hit by a lorry on his way to school. There was no other way to get there apart from along the main road, and he was hit by a lorry. Is now paralysed.
He's 10.
He's 10. And will never fully recover again. So we need to prevent this from ever happening again. And so we need to raise money for a school bus.
OK, so how can people help you?
We've got a Just Giving page under the Zambezi School project where we're raising money.
What's it called?
The Zambezi School project.
OK.
And we are posting updates about it on Instagram, ways for people to get involved in fundraising and just involve as many people as possible.
OK, how much money do you need to raise?
We need about 15,000 for a school bus and to keep that running and the school running. I go as much as I can. I try and go once a year just to see the progress of everything and see what we need to change and implement. We're now planting maize and having chickens so that the children can have breakfast and lunch at school to keep them in education for longer. We're also looking at educating adults who've never read or written before, and just trying to expand it and educate as many people as possible.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, still with me, Kevin Schofield and Kate Andrews. Let us take a look at the front page of the Eye, and hopefully this is good news. We think.
Possibly.
On the surface, it seems like a very good news story. UK interest rate hike set to end, an expert panel has predicted. Kate, take us into this.
Yes, so the Eye seems to have spoken to some economists who are forecasting that inflation may not rise to the 6% that's been expected by the end of the year. Market expectation is still that it will rise to around 6%, but to be fair, that has been falling for some time, and it was above 6% for a while. And this comes after the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, spoke to the Treasury Select Committee this past week. And he said that he thought we were moving out of the time where interest rate hikes were necessary and into a time where that was a bit more vague. Now, to be very another interest rate hike. That's not up to him. That's up to his whole monetary policy committee. They will vote and they will come up with an answer to that question towards the end of the month. But there are a few events this month to look out for. One is obviously the next round of inflation figures, which we get in a few weeks' time. But one is this week, I think it's on Tuesday, we get the latest labour market update, and that will show how quickly wages are rising in the public and private sector. We know the bank is following those figures closely. They are concerned about the concept of a wage price spiral, that wages will bring us a secondary round of inflation. A lot of economists are skeptical of that claim, but we do know that that's what the bank is looking at. So that will be an interesting update. And the suggestion here is that, you know, a wide range of things could happen. We could see rates go up further. We could see the bank decide to hold and raise rates again down the line. But, you know, anybody who has outstanding debt, anybody who has a mortgage is very much looking for the pause on this figure. And, you know, in theory, we could be getting that sooner than expected.
Well, this panel of experts are predicting that there may only be one more interest rate rise, Kevin. But just reading this, you forget that there have been 14 consecutive increases.
Yeah, we've almost got used to it now after such a long period, obviously, of unusually low interest rates. Now, the slight health warning is that Jeremy Hunt did say last week that he expects inflation to go up again a little bit this month. So I would take this just with a slight pinch of salt, but the government will certainly be hoping that these predictions are correct. They want, you know, by the end of the year, interest rates certainly to have levelled off, if not coming down, inflation to be around about 5%, and then they can go into the new year, hopefully with a better story to tell voters as we anticipate the general election will be taking place, possibly as early as next spring.
The negative at the end of this is that some other economists remain pessimistic, warning British inflation is not under control.
That's economists for you, isn't it?
Oh.
They've all got different opinions.
That's your lot, Kate, isn't it?
They try hard. They try hard.
We've just got time for the weather. Now, no, both of you will be at work tomorrow. You're not one of these people that are pulling a sickie to enjoy the sun. But we've got another day of heat wave weather, Kate.
Thankfully, this looks like the last day.
Thankfully, have you not enjoyed it?
The Daily Star is reporting that millions of staff are ditching work to enjoy this weather. I don't really know who's enjoying it at this point. It's just too hot, given that the infrastructure in the UK is not especially conducive to such hot weather. I don't know how people are escaping it. I want to escape. I don't want to indulge in it. But it is supposed to start to cool off. We might get some lovely autumnal weather in the weeks to come.
You will miss it when it's gone. Mark my words, you will. Kevin?
Well, I'm Scottish, you see, so this is unusual weather for me, to put it mildly. Yeah, I don't enjoy it at all. It's OK when you're on holiday and you're expecting it to be hot and there's maybe air conditioning, might even be a swimming pool for you to cool off. But in Britain, it's just, there's no aircon.
The American in me says it's OK when there's access to air conditioning, which is just, so and then you can sleep.
But then we like nothing better in this country than complaining about the weather. We will complain in a couple of weeks' time when it's freezing cold again. So.
Absolutely. When it's raining and thundering, you will be harping back and wishing it was back to the heat wave. Kate and Kevin, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. We shall see you in the 11 o'clock hour. But in the meantime, let's take a look at the weather for you.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next couple of days look unsettled, but it'll turn cooler from the northwest. England and Wales will have a muggy, mostly fine start tomorrow, although there'll be some fog near Irish Sea coast and perhaps the odd shower in the northwest. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland look cooler and cloudier with a little rain in places. South East England, East Anglia and the Midlands will have a mostly fine morning, while northern and western England and Wales can expect a scattering of showers. Elsewhere, Scotland looks mainly dry, but there'll be patchy drizzle in the south and a few showers in the northwest, while Ireland and Northern Ireland will be largely overcast with outbreaks of rain. It'll be cooler and fresher there, still quite muggy in the southeast. Northern and western parts will brighten later, while the Midlands will see showers moving into the north and the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.